This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with the Assistant Athletic Director at Linfield University, Steve Simmons. He discusses his role at the university and the emphasis they place on player-led activities and how they implement this scheme, his experiences of recruiting in the US, and the standout features for some of the best players he's worked with that now play in the MLS, and how practitioners cope with a pressurized environment at a high-profile Division 1 school. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, make sure you share it with family and friends. I hope you enjoy. Steve, first of all, thank you very much for giving up your Tuesday morning to talk to us. How are you? How are things? Are you all safe and well and busy?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a roller coaster of a spring here. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and all things that are COVID related this last year. I know all of us have had to deal with that in certain capacities, and I work at a private, a small university, and so we have our own specific challenges. We just ended our spring term last week. And so, you kind of go a little bit in survival mode just to make sure that we can still have, in-person classes and for us, sporting events on campus. And so we're almost to the other side there. So we consider ourselves pretty fortunate. And, we're planning for brighter days in the fall when we start back up in several months.
Perfect. Well, glad to hear you're well, and I think everyone's the same. We're hoping that the world begins to open back up, and kind of the knowledge that's been shared or the connections we can actually do in person rather than doing it on Zoom as we are now. I guess for those people that don't necessarily know your background or haven't come across your work, do you want to just kind of talk through, I guess, as you said, where you are at the moment and maybe some of the highlights to get you to that point?
Yeah, so currently I'm an assistant athletic director at Linfield University. We're in McMinnville, Oregon, probably about 45 minutes southwest of Portland, which is the metropolitan area that is in our region. And I also serve as the director of soccer here and coach the women's soccer team. So I wear many hats, which is pretty typical for a smaller private university in the States. Before that, I was head men's soccer coach at Oregon State University, which is a larger state institution just down the road from Linfield, and was there for about since 2009. So I was the Oregon State 2009 to 2017. Before that, at Northern Illinois University, and that's just outside Chicago. So I'm going backwards in my chronology here. That was kind of the career track I was on with coaching university soccer in the States. And I've been doing that basically since 1990, 91. And I really found it very enriching. However, for 17 years, I was in this NCAA Division I track of coaching. And that takes on a different type of profile of what's expected. It's probably the closest thing to what you would find in the professional expectations as far as wins, loss, etc., pressure, all those other aspects as we connect it to the professional game. However, there's something really unique and authentic about coaching in the university in the States, where you every year you're going to deal with, for the most part, 18, 19, 20-year-old student athletes who are trying to figure it out. And so in addition to trying to compose a winning soccer program, and winning games. It's also helping these young people out in their journey, and how they're trying to figure things, and what their identities are going to be. And that's kind of when I strip it all back. That's, as much as I love the game, and I love to get into the strategies and the tactics and whatnot. I think that really is the purpose that sticks out the most, is being there to create an environment to help them, to mentor if they want that. Because it's a fast 4 years. 4 years is usually the time frame that the kids in the United States spend at university for their undergraduate degree. And in the meantime, if we can do something that we all love, which is the game of soccer, that's great. That's wonderful. But depending on what level you might coach, that could be quite different. And so I've been fortunate. I've coached at many different levels, and they take on kind of a personality of their own. And I've been fortunate to experience all the highs and lows that come with that. Especially starting out, where trying to get employment in coaching in university is the only profession that, not the only, but the one I could say that you have to take a pay cut to go forward, right? So that was certainly the case in my early years, trying to carve out a professional pathway. But it's been wonderful. I've been able to, my wife and I have been able to raise a family. We have 3 grown children, and so now as I coach, these kids that I'm around are very much similar age to my youngest son, who happens to be a sophomore at Linfield. And I kind of see my role being a lot more parental, than it had been in the past. And that kind of I don't know, maybe put some extra responsibility that I feel that I owe it to the parents of these kids that I'm coaching. So it's certainly, as I've gotten older and through my experiences, have been more holistic as far as how I see my objectives in my role.
Yeah, I think you've obviously touched on some really interesting experiences there. I know, having done my research, that a number of the players you've worked with have gone on to have good careers, particularly in the MLS, etc. We'll touch base on that a little bit later on. I guess starting with where you are now, how was it coming into obviously a private school setting as you are now? And what were the differences between being at a slightly bigger college and higher profile to where you are now? What were the challenges with that?
Well, kind of, ironically, and I did mention this earlier. Linfield, I'd coached here in the early years of my coaching career. So I actually was here from 1996 to 2001, and so Linfield gave me my first full-time employment as a coach. However, I was coaching the men's and women's at the same time, and I also coached the women's lacrosse team in the spring. That was an interesting challenge. And then I did some administrative work. I was our NCAA compliance officer, which is basically the rules person for the athletic department. And so I did that early on. So I got a taste of what it was like to coach at a small private university. And I'm also a product of a small private university as a student athlete myself back in the day. But then when I left Linfield, that's when that journey began into, okay, we're going to go into bigger state institutions where, the dynamic is different, right? The objectives are slightly different. There probably was a bit of more of an emphasis on winning and losing, to be honest with you, for sure. We had more resources than at the small university. The places that I coached, we were always relatively behind our competitors that we had to compete against. And so, I felt like we were always at the bottom third of the Premier League for the most part. That's how I felt. And you have to punch your way up. You have to figure it out, right? And sometimes when you're doing that, and the results are hard to come by, there's a significant amount of pressure that comes with that, and how you react to it, and how the players feel, which is completely different than maybe what you would feel at where I'm at right now. And so the other piece that there are administrators that that at the bigger universities, that a part of their professional pathway is to be able to produce winning sports programs, right? Build facilities and provide winning sports programs. So, if you're in a situation where, you're maybe not doing as well as you need to in your wins losses, that might spur on an administrator trying to create his or her pathway to make a change, right? So you've got different levels of pressures that will be really dependent on leadership styles, right? And kind of their experiences. So that's, I thought, very, very unique. And so, being at a place like a Linfield, that's a smaller liberal arts, there's always the want to win. We all want to do well. I think that it's just not front and center to the degree it is at the larger institutions, where in the United States, especially with the footballs and the basketballs, the ones that are have that NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball pipeline, that there's so much attention on that. And when you're talking about football and football at the highest level in this country and university, there's 80,000-90,000 that fills the stadium. That's ridiculous. I mean, it's the pressure of being a Premier League manager. It's exactly that pressure. And so it was great to be a part of that. And by the way, soccer, very different than football and basketball as far as that, and also the paycheck's much different. So but very, very different. But there's elements of that it makes it more difficult for a coach, I believe, to focus on the holistic piece of the student athletes. Not to say that the coaches at the big schools can't do that. I know that some do a really good job, but what's front and center are usually is your wins and losses, and that just sometimes makes it very, very cloudy to put the student athlete first. Their well-being, make it a student athlete centered scenario, makes it difficult at times.
And so, looking at the schedule for you guys, before we delve into that, because I think it's really interesting around the pressurized environments, etc. What would your season look like in that environment? So, when would you start pre-season? How long would it be for? How many games do you get? What's the ultimate goal? Say for an Oregon, for example, and then if you want to compare it to Linfield, that's fine.
Yeah. So, like maybe at a Division I school like Oregon State. It's kind of a 12-month out of the year deal. It's a full year cycle, and whereas that maybe at a Linfield, it could be a full year cycle, but there's a lot more space in that cycle for hands off from the coaches, because the NCAA is our governing body, has a lot of specific rules on what coaches can and can't do. And so, when you look at the Division I, which is the largest of institutions, these kids are on athletic scholarship usually. They have a lot of resources usually, and it is a 12-month out of the year, except for maybe maybe 4 to 6 weeks in the summertime, but still they still are checking in and whatnot. And even though, like, for example, soccer at the Division I level is in the fall, when it's normal, not COVID, but when it's normal, it's in the fall. When January rolls around, it's off-season training, and there's lifting and there's running programs with usually the strength conditioning coach. And then the spring season will go anywhere from February, March to May, and then the summer program starts, and you do it all over again. And that's more hands-on. Where at a Linfield, at a Division III level, it's less hands-on, right? So our season would be in middle of August, and we would go to the end of November, early December, and then from like January, February, March, it's almost player-led, right? Because at a smaller institution, these kids are going to want to do more things. There's a little more balance, and then we might have something of a spring in just the month of April, and then they do their player-led summer workout. So it's significantly different profile in what the calendar looks like, and that's on purpose. So we'll have kids that I think athletically maybe would want to compete a Division I, Division II level. However, they want to do more things. They're maybe not wrapped up into I want to be a professional. These kids want to have a good soccer experience, but they also want to have leadership positions in our student government, or they want to do things with their fraternities and sororities, which is very, very popular in the States. And some of them may want to do another sport. So we've got some kids that are two sport athletes. They'll do soccer in the fall and maybe like a run track or something in the spring. So it's certainly more holistic that way. You don't see that too much at the higher levels, but the calendar for sure at an Oregon State type of university for athletics, it's a 12-month deal.
So I guess two questions off the back of that. The first one is, how do you go about supporting the athletes to make it player-led, but also, I guess, useful, because you don't want them just going doing player-led and smashing the ball at the goals and getting your centre-half shooting all the time. And then the next question as well is, obviously, you've mentioned there that kind of when the game season would be for colleges, etc. During your off-season stuff, how do you manage the players maybe not playing as frequently or not playing games for the other however many months of the season? Because I can imagine that could be quite challenging where they're training and trying to get development physically or technically, but not having any actual area to grade it in because they're not playing fixtures.
Yeah, no, that's been a question that, especially at the Division I level, has been going on for quite some time. Not enough matches to develop players, and you got to think about the purpose too of Division I. It's winning those matches, and these kids at that level having a pathway to play pro. They want to be pros, and so that's why you'll see a lot of those kids, especially on the men's side, anyways, because those were the opportunities that are available, that will leave university early to go play pro. Right, even if it's playing at a lower division pro, so they can get the matches. But that's what that those objectives for Division I are very much centered around there. And so this is where you see the gap in between maybe the rest of the world on, hey, development, you got to play X number of fixtures a year, where in the States we're still in our own little bubble, right? Of here we do this and they have this period off, and then we do something else. Because you would look back in the 70s and 80s in the States, these kids, before club soccer became as prevalent, in the fall you would do certain sport, in the winter you would do certain sport, and in the spring you would do certain sport, and then you do it all over again. So you basically played 3 or 4 different sports growing up, and that was very commonplace. It's less commonplace now because you've got soccer that's got a prolific club system. You got volleyball that's a prolific club system. Softball, it goes down and down the line there. But there's still this structure of you play different sports. And so it kills the soccer purist. The soccer purist going, I don't understand, because you need 60, 80 matches a year to have some type of adaptation so that you can build your skill. And so that's been the conversation around the highest levels in Division One for sure. Now, for the level I'm at right now, Division Three, it's not so much. My challenge is to develop a leadership core of players that that they feel empowered, that they can have some ownership in their team in order to be able to help the group advance, and understanding that in the off season, for us would be in the winter and spring, that they can, you know, do lifting and do running and have small sided trainings on their own, right? So that they can at least maintain and have investment. So in that way, it could be a little nerving for the coach, right? That you kind of you're not there to structure them, but at the same time, it's a wonderful opportunity to teach them to empower themselves, to lead, and what it's like to be responsible and have responsibility, and to, you know, I think it's hard to manage teammates, right? I mean, because you're kind of mates and you're friends, and but at the same time, you know, we've got a purpose, we've got goals to do, and I think, you know, the trick is if you can get a bunch of young people to understand the value of that and go through that experience. I think on the other side, you've got a wonderful team. Honestly, when you get them as a coach, they're already clicking, right? They're already clicking, and they're self-led, they're motivated, and so you know, I'm not saying that's the easiest way to do it, but I think for me personally, I found that that's the most powerful way, you know, and it's just investing that. So very different, right? A little different than maybe at the Division One level. Although I know there's some Division One programs out there that have wonderful leadership groups that do something similar. But at the Division Three level, you got to count on that more because we just don't have as much contact time with them.
So how do you go about framing that then? Obviously, you said there it's about giving them empowerment. How do you go around selecting the individuals that you think are going to be appropriate for it? And how do you go about framing it for them so that, and how often do you check in? What does that look like from a, you know, from a weekly basis?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it's something that I try to make intentional. So for now, I'm actually going through some leadership development with my next group. So our next season is in the fall, and so we're starting right now, going through that process of giving this leadership group an opportunity to learn and equip them with ideas to fill their toolkit, right? To give them a chance to ask questions, reflect on their experiences when they weren't leaders, right? And how these players kind of came to this particular situation. Most of them are older, so they've had experiences. So, you know, they're upperclassmen. So for us, they're my juniors and seniors, mostly all seniors and juniors. So third and fourth years to be. And also I talk to them about, you know, what are the qualifications, and our qualifications, you know, are character and competence, right? So you have to have the character piece and then the competence piece of being able to basically carry on more responsibility. And I do this thing with them. I did this with this group last month of like, listen, this is what this is going to look like. You may not want to do it. I'm trying to scare them out of it because it is a lot. And I try to explain to that, and it's okay if they don't want to do that, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I don't think of them any less. But I'm just trying to be transparent that, you know, it's, you know, basically doing something bigger than yourself, which, you know, when you're that age and you're locked in on your schoolwork. So these kids, they have tremendous amount of schoolwork, right? And so even in the summertime, a lot of these kids are doing research. So the idea of like taking on more weight is for some, at first a bit of a shock, but they've all accepted and see the value of how that's going to help them, and help their team. And so for the bigger picture, they feel that going through this experience of leadership is going to make them better people. It's going to make them better teammates, and it's going to make us, better on the field. Those type of things. And so it's a very important aspect of what I do. I know other programs do something maybe similar, maybe some don't. But I believe that there's a space, there's a void that's there that I think needs to be filled. And if you don't fill it, then it could be filled. It's going to be filled with something, right? It could be leadership, it could be lack of leadership, it could be complacency. So I try to be very intentional about that. And every year, my leadership group will look different. It's a different team with different personalities. Last year we had a leadership group of 4 people that were tremendous. I called them cultural architects because they did a lot of heavy lifting to leave it in a better place when they started. And so now this group is going to try to press on from there, and I'll have groups after this will continue to do that, and they'll do it their own way. But there are some common threads, and the threads are, you build leadership one relationship at a time. It's about building relationships with your groups and your teammates, and building trust, so that we can be clear and and also making sure what your why is. Why are you doing this? Why are you here? Because I think that's the most powerful question that I challenge my team to ask themselves all the time, because I ask myself, right? Why am I doing this? And so it's the driving force to all the behaviors that we want to see. And for me, my part is just to give them structure and help them through the process.
And so in terms of selecting those individuals, how do you go around selecting them?
Yeah. So obviously watching, observing their actions, behaviors over the course of a couple years, getting input from the prior leadership group who have relationships and who knows what it takes and what you have to go through, and then my coaching staff, having them offer their input. And then we start with a pool of candidates, and then having conversations with those candidates that are pretty they're pretty upfront. And is this something that you want to do? This is kind of what it's going to look like. These are the sacrifices you're going to have to make, and a lot of it's time. You have to put more time into it. So that's kind of how we come up with it. I'm sure as we move on, I'm hoping we can evolve. Maybe we can find better ways to do that. But for now, that's kind of the process.
And then you mentioned that initial meeting with them, kind of try and scare them out of it a little bit to make them understand kind of, I guess, the impact the role can have. Because if you do it well, it's going to have a really positive impact. But equally, if you don't do it well, it's going to, have a negative impact on some younger people. What, in terms of processes or timeframes, do you give them? So what is their initial timeframes of going, right, these are the 4 of you, you've all agreed to do it, you need to do X, Y, and Z to start laying the foundations for this?
Right. So what the process for the time I approach an individual to the time we actually get on with it will vary depending on the circumstance. This year was really different because of COVID, right? We actually had our fall season in the spring, and so that really put everything on its head. But in general, I would like to have, if it's a normal scenario, we have our fall season. After the fall, we have we call a review preview of where we were and where we want to be. And at that point, I'll start to approach certain individuals going forward of going through our leadership program in January, February, March, April, so that we can be ready for the spring and summer, and then the new group comes in. And so that's how the timing goes. But this year we've had to really condense it, because we finished our season at the beginning of April. At that point, we did our personal development plans for each player, talk about things they did well, things they want to improve on, and then from that, start to approach some of those potential leaders and have those conversations. And then if when they feel that they're in, which is usually a matter of a couple of days, they'll reflect on it. We get the group together and we crack on. And like right now, like tonight actually is one of our first meetings on a book that we're reading as a group that will hopefully give them some tools for their leadership toolkit.
So initially, are you trying to give them like the tools like you're alluding to there, or are you trying to give them like example timetables and stuff to say this is you go through? What's the initial stage in terms of providing them with, I guess, data or examples to be able to use moving forward?
Yeah, so there are a number of different ways we can do it. The way I'm currently doing, I have the group reading a book that we go through and have questions on each of the sections of the book that are relatable to their own experiences and what they may experience going forward. And so they obviously have the luxury of looking at what happened to the prior leadership group and go, oh yeah, they had to go through some of these things. Now they're in it. They can reflect on that. And then we also give them more case studies that are in addition to their own experiences for them to sift through and try to make sense of it and go, okay, so what would you do in these scenarios and why? And
have you got any examples of those case studies?
Yeah, the book that we're going through right now is called Extreme Ownership. It's by Leif Babin and Jocko Willink. It's they're two former Navy SEALs, United States Navy SEAL officers, and that book was actually highly recommended to me by one of my former captains at Oregon State University, who is a Navy SEAL now. He is one of them, and he thought it would be good for sport captains to go through this, and it's a very practical book, and I've done it a couple times, and so they basically take leadership principles that are that they used on the battlefield, that they also apply to business or organizations, right? So they've been able to transfer it that way. And I found it successful to be able to transfer it to sport cultures, sporting teams like the ones we have, because a lot of those challenges are very similar. And so one of my favorite case studies is they had in the Navy SEALs, they have a buds training, which is basically it's Hell Week. They're trying to sift you out, right? They're trying to sort you out, and they're trying to see who can survive. And they had a thing called the boat races, where they basically take these 200-pound rafts, and there's teams of 6 or 7 people that all they do is have these races, 6 or 7 boats with 6 or 7 people that have they're chafed, they're in the water, they have to run on the sand, they're bleeding, and they have to hold the boat over their shoulder. And so they're going through this physically and mentally strenuous exercise, and the thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to be last, because the last place boat gets it pretty hard from the the leaders, the officers that are running it. And so there was an episode where one boat was always last, and there was one boat was always first, and one of the officers had said, "Why don't we switch the leaders?" So they switched the leaders, right? They took the leader from the first place boat to the last place boat, and vice versa, and then they cracked on and did it again, and the last place boat ended up being in first place, and the first place boat still did well, but they were in second place. And the concept was there are no such thing as bad groups, but bad leaders. The effect of leadership. And then they did a business application as well of how that was for a tech company. So that's one of my favorite ones, and I believe that concept too. In general, there's and you see that. You see that in I know in the UK with all sorts of different, especially in soccer in the UK. You see that in how do you inspire and get teams to be on the same page, and I think that taking ownership. The book is called Extreme Ownership. That's one of the great examples of a leader taking extreme ownership, and I'm trying to teach my players the concept of what that extreme ownership means, and so. That's one of my favorite examples that we go through.
No, I like that phrase. There's no such thing as bad groups, just bad leadership. I think that's a really interesting phrase to use. So in a practical setting, what do these leaders actually do, and how do they decide which individuals are in which group? Is it position specific? Is it need specific? Right. What does that actually look like? And then in terms of the details of things they actually deliver to their peer group, what do they actually deliver to them on on a practical sense?
So the initial responsibilities that they will have is they will organize themselves in groups for the summer, these small groups, and in their groups they could have returning players who are maybe second-year players, third-year players, as well as new players like freshmen that are coming in from high school. And so making sure that their small group is on track with what they need to do to prepare themselves for the fall when they come in for the season, but also to build relationships, to be able to help the new players that are leaving home, right, potentially for the first time, and making that a smooth onboarding process. And so we leave it to them to figure out how frequent they want to do check-ins. And so we have kids that in groups are going to be scattered all over the country. And so, one of the, like we're doing right now, one of the silver linings with the COVID that everybody knows how to use Zoom or something like it. So, to be able to connect is something that you can do. Obviously in person is always the best, but making sure that these groups, these leaders of these groups are connecting on a frequent basis so that they can check in on each other. And I think that is an intentional piece of what we all want the culture to be. And now these group leaders know how they fit into affecting that culture. And so that would be the first thing. And then when we all come back, they may have specific roles that maybe accentuates their strengths. So we might have, some that are really good at planning, player get-togethers, because that's kind of what they do. And you have others that, for example, I've got a player who she's interning as an exercise physiologist and going through strength conditioning, and so she's writing up and has wrote up a summer training program for soccer players, and so she's going to execute that as a part of her academic experience, right? So there's all these different roles that are necessary, and I'll obviously try to put them in the best role to get the most out of their experience, but also to serve the team.
No, I think it's really interesting. It comes down to what their skill sets are as well, utilizing the skill sets in the team and adjusting accordingly. Have you had any particularly challenging situations with this where either individuals haven't done it particularly well or one of the other teammates has taken exception or acted out? Has there been any challenges to implementing it?
Yeah, it's happened, especially early on. A couple years ago, we had experienced that, and you have to have a positive outlook, but also expect those things to happen. And what do you do when those happen? And we believe in being transparent and honest, and be able to handle the responsibility head on. And at the end of the day, we want to um, help those people in those moments to reflect and improve. You know, but when it's all said and done, we'll help them, but they've got to be able to do the work. And so sometimes, in a leadership position, they might have to take another role that's not a leadership position, right? Because it's affecting the whole group. But to get to there, we certainly want to coach up these individuals so that they can, reach their potential. But I also know that everybody's got a different learning line, right? Everybody's track to learn is different. We're all different individuals with different experiences that we bring in, and so at that time, maybe some of these leaders aren't quite ready for it. That they might tell me they are in my scared straight talk with them, but when it really hits the fan, maybe not. And so I'll find another role for them that maybe is different. But the thing that we don't want to have is we don't to have things go toxic, right? That's the thing that we're all on the lookout for to try to address and try to remedy. But I think, like in any organization, if you can do the right things most of the time, as far as how we go about what we do, what we say, who we are, it still won't be 100%. And there are those tough decisions that you have to make once in a blue moon. We just don't want them to be as frequent.
What about if you've got an individual within the group that keeps challenging one of these people in a leadership role?
Yeah, I think it depends on the nature of the challenge, right? I think the nature of the challenge for us is healthy to question. It's healthy. It's not a dictatorship. But the nature of the challenge, if it's undermining, if it's toxic, then that will be an issue that I'll help the leadership group sort out. And but again, same thing. There's healthy challenges, because we all, if we're in a growth mindset, we're going to take some of these questions head on, and maybe we need to think outside the box on some things. And so we one of the things we talk about is we take no offense, we mean no offense. That's something that we talk about. So this is a scenario that we would definitely sort out in that same manner.
Perfect. So one of the things you mentioned earlier on was around the why. Why do people play, or what is the motivation? And this is one of the things when Larry put us in touch, he told me to touch on with you, because he said that you had some interesting thoughts and whatnot around this area. So I guess from you and your experiences, what is the importance of asking the why? And I guess how do you go around, particularly with the older age groups who are going to be maybe socially more aware, and maybe at times are going to mask what their real why is or whatnot? How do you go around discovering that why, and why is it so important to understand what the motivation for an individual is?
Well, I think the why is is at the core. It's at the beginning of how we want to act, behave, how we want to persevere, how we want to reach objectives. and it's the thing that drives it. And so I try to explain that to the players. I do that in the recruiting process. When I'm recruiting players, I'll say, why do you want to play college soccer? Why, and it's interesting because I don't get the answers, but I know the wheels are spinning. And sometimes, when they really, really think about it, they might discover that it's different than they thought it would be. When you're younger, and especially if you're an exceptional player, the why could also be conditioned by your parents, right? And things of that nature. At Linfield, the why for our kids, it's important for them to not only ask themselves that the first time, but on a regular basis, because especially with the age kids you're talking about, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, there's significant changes throughout each of those ages. They're looking at the life at 18 years old as, wow, I just left home and I'm going to do a new routine. I'm going off to university. Well, when they're 20, 21, they're going, wow, I'm gonna have to get a job soon, or wow, I'm gonna have to do this soon. And if you're at a Division I level, you might be thinking, okay, how am I gonna get a contract? What's that gonna look like? And so that why should be, at the end of the day, pretty consistent, And so at Linfield, I love the game. I've been playing it since I was young. I love to compete. I love to win. I love my teammates, and I love this place that gives me the opportunity to do all these things. Because just like in the UK, there's a fraction of people that love the sport of football that can get paid for it full time. That's the reality. Even less in the United States. So the odds are you're not going to make a living doing that. So for us in the States, these kids, this is probably the last hurrah for them to play a highly structured, at a highly structured level of soccer. That's it. And so if you're going to do it, make sure you know why you're doing it. You're doing it because you love to play, you want to learn, you want to get better, you want to compete, because after the 4 years, you're done. It's over. Yeah, you have at the Division I level, a fraction of those players go on, and I've been super fortunate to coach some of those players, but the overwhelming majority, the 99% of players who go play in the university, that's the highest level. So I believe it's got to be a transformational experience for them that they're going to take with them to whatever they decide to do. Because I think there's a lot of lessons that you can get out of college sport.
And this is a sensitive question. Do you think there's any whys that are more valid than others? So from your experiences, would you say that there's some whys you go, yeah, that's completely understandable, I 100% agree with that, whereas there might be others where you go, that's not a valid why, that's not a good reason to be playing?
Yeah, well, I think that's a personal question. So the validity of a why, you can have one person saying, I play because I want to be a professional one day, right? And to that person, that's the driving force. And someone else could see that and say, well, you're not as good as you think, and that it's probably going to be difficult for you because there's not the pathways. They're not the pathways to play as much, right? So it depends on the person. I think it's a personal why. An answer to that is for your experiences coming to that moment, you're thinking flat out, well, for me, I want to have fun because, in my past experiences, I didn't have as much fun, right? So I think the validity of a why depends on the person.
And so when you're looking, as you mentioned there, kind of recruiting individuals, how much emphasis do you place on that answer? And are there any red flags that come to you as a recruiter?
100%. Yeah, that totally. I for me, I want the why to be very intrinsic, right? It's very intrinsic. Now, if gosh, back when I was coaching in Division One, a lot of the whys came to be, I want to play pro, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I also know that that's a moving target. That's something, somebody somewhere has to sign you and offer you a contract. So that part's out of your control. I think your why should be very intrinsic. It should be the thing that when you wake up, there it is, and you're dealing with it. So with those who are looking at extrinsic whys to be driven by things of the outside nature, I tell them, I said, there's nothing wrong having a goal, but your goal and your why can be different, right? I think that's very, very important. Your purpose and your goals can be different. Your goals could be, hey, I want to play pro one day, which is fine, but what is your why to do that? And I think, given a person clarity is critical. It's a part of I think my responsibility as their coach, mentor in their phase of life at that moment, because they're developing still, to have them reflect on, able to learn from it.
And how do you go about aligning the players' why with the team's why or your why? So the example I use for it would be, you've stated earlier on that your culture that you've created is very development focused, developing them holistically, people and players, whereas you might have a player that comes into your team who isn't really worried about the development, just wants to win. Every time they play and train on matches, they want to win. That is what they're focused on. At times, those two are going to counteract one another, because it might be you not giving them a piece of information, or you putting them in at the deep end a little bit so that they develop longer term, which counteracts completely against the winning. So how do you go about aligning those, or where do you go about merging them enough so that both parties have a sense of, okay, this is a compromise I'm willing to make?
Well, the answer to the first question is, I'm responsible to make sure that the people that I bring in, while they may not be perfectly aligned, that they are aligned enough that they can grow, right? So I'm looking at those factors. How do I do that? It's through asking questions. It's through talking to their coaches, maybe their teachers, doing some background homework, right, on them. So while they might not be spot on all the time, but I got to feel they're close enough that they can grow. And then I'm very, very clear to everybody that, the growth part is going to look different for everybody, right? There's going to be some growth part for some people that will have that friction that you're talking about. And I will be very intentional so that I feel that they have the opportunity to grow. And growing sometimes can be painful, right? And I don't do it certainly for short-term gains, but it's for long-term sustainment. And that's where in sport, you as a coach, you kind of have to walk the line with, okay, results, short-term, long-term. You got to go through that. Do I not put a player into the lineup or start them because there's a lesson to be learned for that player that is valuable, at the expense of, hey, you know what? It'd be nice to have this forward in there because that forward can score a lot of goals for you, and you might not get a result because of that. And I think about those scenarios all the time. I certainly don't want to put the team from reaching their objectives of winning and performing well, but at the same time, there is a holistic piece that is very, very important. And anything that is against a culture is not worth the result. It just isn't. And I can say that with ease at the level that I'm coaching at. And I get it. When you're at a higher level, that's not as easily said, some people can feel they lose their job because you're not getting results because you're trying to, make a statement here and there. But for me, these aren't statements. These are growing opportunities. And so, but I try to make sure I do my homework in advance and help these kids in advance so that we don't find ourselves in those moments too often, right? Yes, we're going to find ourselves in those moments, but if I can mitigate that and get on the front end of these things, the better off we will all be. But I understand that there are times, you have to, as a coach, maybe make a decision that's more long-term than short-term. And you do everything you can to still get the short-term game and the long-term solution.
So you semi-answered my next question, which was going to be, when you're at the D1 level, where obviously there is pressure to win games or get through to national championships, etc. How do you manage that dynamic then?
Yeah, that's a tough one, especially if you feel that result-wise your squad is on the precipice of doing something very special. That's a hard one, but most of the time, you're there doing something very special because of the behaviors, because of your culture. Obviously, there's a skill piece that's there, but going through my experiences, I will tell you this: I never want to be held hostage by anything that is going to go against what we're trying to be as a group. And sometimes, a coach can feel they're held hostage by a talented player, right? And so there's the legwork you got to put into that, and certainly there's a lot of investment that you have to make in certain players more than others to get them to come around and to see. And I know that's not easy. That's not easy at all. But if you're looking to try to sustain success instead of being one-offs, then there is a common denominator that is crystal clear through all of it. And as much as it pains me to praise Sir Alex Ferguson, I mean, he was brilliant at taking things head on when he thought it was against culture and removing players that you would never thought you would remove, right? Because nothing was bigger than the team and the culture. And I think that if you have a team or organization that's aspiring, you will find yourself in those moments at times where you have to make a choice. And if you're in a situation that you're able to choose the long term and do it the right way, then you've got yourself to a good place. And I think that there's no easy answer to it, but there is a feeling, and I've been in that feeling before, and it's very unsettling. But I can tell you right now, where I sit, it's clear what I do. It's you do what's best for the culture. You do what's best for the long term, because I believe the short term results will sort itself out.
No, I think that makes complete sense, and I think it's a really interesting predicament, because a lot of coaches all around the world will be able to relate to that, where you have someone who isn't quite fitting in with the culture or is affecting the rest of the team, and how do you manage that? So looking in terms of long-term development and stuff, as we mentioned earlier, you've worked with some really good players that have gone on to achieve some really good things within the MLS. So looking at the list I found, you've got David Mwanga, don't want to butcher his name, Emery, Welshman, and Khiry, Shelton, who are the three that kind of sprung out of mine. Is there any common factors that you saw between those three that really made them stand out, either within their why or as them as individuals, that have helped them to really push on in their careers?
When I had the opportunity to be with those three, I certainly did not have the depth to talk to them about their why. I wish I did. I really do. I wish I did, because I think I would have maybe helped them a little bit more, right? The three the things that they all had in common, they were naturally gifted. So they brought things to the table that were nature. They were just very gifted at being footballers, athletes, etc. The other thing is that the three were exceptionally driven. They were very driven to be at the best they could be, because they all felt that the next step for them after university was a realistic opportunity, and it was, for sure. And so it's different when you can't see that next stop, and it's a desert. But if you see it and you go, man, it's not that far away, the motivation can be very, very different. So they were very driven, and they all had their own journey, relatively different journeys, and they all were exceptional people. They're like they're nice people. They treated people nice. They were people of character. They were trustworthy. I mean, I can go on and on about the character piece of those three. And so that probably, outside of some of the freakish athletic talent that they carried, probably those three, that the character piece, and the kindness, how they treated people, that's the thing that jumps off at me when I think about those three. So, they are all added value to any team's culture, right? So, they have their trials or whatnot at the professional level, and you know how it is that managers in one day and they bring you in, and all of a sudden they're out, and there's another manager maybe doesn't fancy you, right? And so the thing that all these three could add value to with any manager is that they add value to their culture, the team's culture. They work hard. They treat people nice. They take responsibility. They are good in their craft on the field, but they're team players for sure, who have, they have the ability to step into the spotlight if the coach needs them to do that. And that for me, that transcends with any type of organization. And so I think with those three, that character piece, it's front and center outside of their athletic ability. That character. I've seen really good athletes that unfortunately don't have that character piece, and they live short careers, if any.
And so, obviously, I'd imagine when you went to recruit them, and you're sitting in that front room trying to get them to come to your college, I imagine they would have other offers, and you would have understand that they were very good players. And I imagine you would have done some due diligence on their background and stuff. Was there anything in particular when you were sitting in front of them that you were able to really highlight to say, I definitely want this player win my team? I feel like if this player is in my team, he would really help us outside of just being an outstanding footballer.
Yeah, and with those three, they're all different stories. With Danny Mwanga. Danny, I inherited him. So when I came to Oregon State, he was already there. But one of the things I did was have a meeting with him as I took the job. I met with him to basically say, hey, here's who I am. Here's where I see you play. Here's what we're going to do, et cetera, et cetera. With Emery Welshman, Emery actually was a transfer. So he was at another university, transferred to Oregon State. And so in that transfer process, I had to get to know him and his family. I remember going on a recruiting trip to Europe and stopping in Toronto, because that's where Emery's from. Stopping in Toronto, the airport there had a layover to meet with him and his parents. And talk about what my vision was and where I saw him, and then kind of see how he was. And then with Khiry Shelton, Khiry, that was he played for me all 4 of his years. And so I met with him and his family, his mom and dad in Austin, Texas, where he was from at the time, and got to know him that way. Um, when you look at these kids on the field and you're evaluating them, they jump off. They're like, wow, they're exceptional. And so what I do right away, I talk to their coaches and the people that know them best and see if there are red flags I got to be concerned about. And with these three, they were all just exceptional people. And so that was good. That's an important box to check for me. And so from then, it's to sell them on why Oregon State at the time is the place they could thrive. And with Danny, he was already there, so that was less of a sell, but still I wanted him to be on board. But with the other two, I had to do that, and it was about the culture, and it was about aligning. Hey, in this culture, you can also achieve team goals as well as your personal goals. Knowing their personal goals, they want to play at the next level, right? So being able to align that while other suitors are doing the same thing. So it's a bit of a rat race that way. All I can do is say, this is who we are. This is what we try to do. This is how we do it. And if it aligns with you, then you'll find yourself having a great experience here. And so that's what I always try to do to my best of my ability. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But it's out there. It's who we are. So when they do come here, I feel that, they are getting the bill of goods that we talked about.
And do you think that's important? Because I'd imagine in that it'd be very easy to be a salesman and say, you know what, you're going to play every minute as striker. I'm never going to sub you. We're going to go through you every single time. We're going to make you look like Messi. But then in reality, you can't live up to that promise. So is the fact of being genuine and having that I guess authorities say, look, here's my previous, I've followed through on all these promises previously. Is that an important part of the recruitment process for you on a personal level?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you do have to be a salesman. It's just, what are you selling? The thing is, I think at the time I'm trying to sell a fantastic experience, right? And what it could lead to. I never promised, starting or playing time, but what I would say is that, well, if you can do what you can do, then you're going to get what you're going to get, especially with the environment we're trying to create. And, I believed in that. And I felt we try to live through that. And I still do that now, even at Linfield. It's very, very important that we do that. But I can't get carried away on what others might do to sway them, because that's not me. And have I lost maybe recruits that could have impacted us? Maybe, probably. But I also know I can go to sleep at night too. That's actually more important. And the kids that do come in, when there's all said and done, hopefully they feel that they've got the experience that they were we're talking about across the dinner table when I visited them when they were in high school.
And how much of a challenge is it for you competing against what might be considered traditionally bigger university or more high profiles? You look around, you've got, your Stanfords, your UCLAs, Clemson, etc., who all could potentially be going after the same players, all different part of the country, etc. How challenging was it for you in that role to go after similar players? And was there a particular USP that you could offer, or was it just a case of the program, the environment that you created?
No, I thought it was a tremendous challenge. I think it kind of still is today. But when I reflect back on being the bottom third of the Premier League, right? And having to you named right there the Big Six, right? For U.S. university soccer at Division I level, that's kind of the Big Six. And how is that possible? And I think knowing what I know now, it's making sure that, it's appealing to young people that they're going to be happy, and what's going to make you happy? Well, you're going to become a better player. You're going to learn. You're going to do that in an environment where it's going to be challenging, but it's going to be positive, and that you're going to want to come to training every day because you love it, right? And I think that, being able to be consistent and resonate that message and do that with your current teams, yeah, that's going to be something where it is going to be appealing, right? It is going to be appealing. And now, is there salesmanship to kind of polish that to get, more the top kids in the door? Potentially, right? Potentially. But I think that, you are who you are. And if you get those right players in now, as a coach, you have to be able to put them in a situation where you can knock off the big sixes, right? You do what Leicester City's doing right now. You do what West Ham's doing right now, where they are doing it right. And the question that I would have with West Ham is like, is this a one-off, right? Like all you guys over there are thinking about that, but you look at what Brendan Rodgers done at Leicester, it's like, this might not be a one-off. There could be something there, right? So I love to look at those types of situations where you're going, God, this organization is trying to sustain something. You can tell. And it's not just buying the biggest players, right? It's something different. So we might not have got the same players as UCLA or Clemson, but we got the right players to do what we do awfully well. That at the end of the day, we can compete and beat these teams. And so, and I believe that. So I think that just being yourself, and obviously having the right game model to get these types of players. But they also want to be happy. They want to be happy. Yeah, they're going to work hard, and they're gonna grow, and it's gonna be painful sometimes. But going through that process, I think that's something that's a valuable commodity that you can sell. That you can be you can be one of the bottom six, but you're actually playing like a big six, and that's something that I think you can do anywhere. But it's not easy. But it does start with your culture and how you want your sides to look.
And so when you're looking at pressurized situations, in terms of competing against those big teams, competing in national championships and all that type of stuff, you alluded to earlier, in your football and stuff, some of the crowds they get at college games is extraordinary, really. You've got 120,000 people, 80,000 people, 90,000 people often cheering for 18, 19-year-olds, and you see them around campus, everyone's going to know exactly who they are and all that type of stuff. What type of pressures do you think that puts on an athlete, and how do you feel like you can support them? I know in a football context or soccer context, it might be a little bit different, but I'd imagine competing for a big university, big D1 university, is still going to have some of those pressures. So how do you help them transition and cope with those?
Well, and you're right. I coaching D1 soccer players is different than coaching D1 American football players or D1 basketball players, because those pressures are extremely different. They're extremely different, and so I don't have personal experience doing that. What I do have is personal observations of how some of these programs did that, and again, it depends on the coaching philosophy and the coaching environment. There's a coaching staff at one point that they were very holistic in how they treated their players, and you can see them kind of helping them with more than just the American football. And I thought that was very empowering to them, as the few that end up getting drafted in the NFL, being very successful, being able to kind of sustain the pressures, because I think they were able to develop human skills, right? The competitive maturity that you need to be at that level. I've never been at that level, and I haven't coached at that level, so I don't know what it's like. But I just watching from across the way,
Was
I
there anything in
remember,
particular they did that stood out to you? Any particular example of that?
yeah, I remember, I was going to say, these schools in the spring would have NFL combines at their campus. So, you know, there would be some days like right now, this time of year, where a bunch of NFL scouts would come to a campus and they would run these players through certain activities and drills and get times. And so there's a pressure because they're sitting right there watching you. And the thing that jumped out at me with the experience I'm thinking about on top of my head is the human side of just being able to put an arm around a shoulder with some of these players who, in their minds, it's a life-changing contract that's potentially on the other side of this, and being able to have them deal with pressures in a way that, hey, it's going to be okay. It's not about whether you get a certain 40-yard sprint time. It's doing the best you can and trying to boil it down to that, so that they know that you're humans first who happen to be trying to make the NFL. And I thought that was just tremendous, when you appeal to that piece. One of the coaches told me, even if they do make the NFL, after they're done, they're going to be human again, right? They're going to have to come back. So, we try to help them on the front side. And I thought that was just a tremendous way how you treat people and how you help young people through.
Yeah, I think that's a really prevalent point. I was listening to a podcast the other day with a footballer out here. To be fair, played for Liverpool, John Ostenbaugh. He played a few years ago, and he was talking on a podcast and was talking about the struggles of losing identity after finishing playing. And I think that what you said there around, you'll be a football player and then you'll be someone else after it. I think that's something that probably isn't drip fed into athletes enough, is that you can be holistic, and being Michael, the football player, you can just be Michael who plays football. And those are two very different, statements.
100%. Yeah.
So I think
I agree with that so much.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting way to go. And I guess, and this is challenging for you from your perspective, did you see it change the coaches? Did you see the pressure either of winning or losing change how the coaches either dealt with themselves, how they dealt with the players, how they dealt with the people around the facilities? Did you see that at all?
Yeah. You can tell, the vibe if the season was going well. You can kind of feel the spirit around the whole athletic department, and you can feel it the other way around. You can just there's a weight, a fog. And even though I'm totally separate from that, and I've got my own scenario to deal with, you can just feel it. I remember there was one year that the football team was doing exceptionally well, and man, everybody had a little pep in their step and smile. I mean, it was there's that feeling that way, and which is good and bad. I mean, it's good because you want to celebrate people doing well and the kids doing well and so on, but it's bad that you have to be dependent on that, right? You know that you're going to have good and bad, and you're going to have to deal with them, and so we try to crack on to do the best we can regardless of what was going on with our football or basketball team. But you can tell there was a feeling of either good or bad depending on the season, and it kind of permeated through the rest of the athletic department at times.
And was there anything that you took away as a practitioner that you said either I could steal that for soccer players or myself, or I definitely wouldn't do that, or I wouldn't use that on my players?
Yeah, I would. Well, first of all, if we were having a good football or basketball season, I would use it as a recruiting tactic. So, because you would get exposure on TV, you'd be on ESPN or something like that. So you would get those impressions that are valuable in the recruiting side of things. But as far as practitioner, um, I wasn't on the and I didn't go to their practices, and I wasn't on the inside of their staff meetings, so I don't know the ins and outs. And I think that's the part where sometimes as observers we kind of see the byproduct of some decisions. But I know, because having my own staff meetings, there's that iceberg effect. There's so much that goes on beneath the surface that that we don't know if you're not in there, right? And so I do know this is that when things aren't going well, you can see the pressure of having to make decisions weigh heavily, especially on the coaches. You can just see it. You can see that at any level, honestly, any level. But you can see that in their faces and the body language that they're going through some stuff right now. And I always try to be personal with them. I always try, lighten it up with a joke or something. But there are times I know that they were going through some challenges, and but I wasn't privy to all the things that happened in the inside in the boot room, right? I don't know. I kind of would love to have been a fly on the wall, right? The Jose Mourinho all in access, right? I mean, that's why those things are so damn popular, because of you're seeing these things, quote unquote, kind of unfiltered, and I can't tell you how many times I listen to British talk sport and listen to Spurs fans talk about that documentary, right? And because how many times do we ever get access? Never. I mean, it's never. And so I wish I could, because I would want to learn, for sure. But I do know this, those people, and I've been one of those people, you are in a situation where you might feel the pressure, and you just hope that you make good decisions regardless.
Perfect. Listen, Steve, I'm going to ask you one last question, because I know we're fastly approaching the time that we allow for this. So, who is the best coach or player you've worked with or against, and why?
Ooh, yeah, I knew this was coming. Played, well, the three that you mentioned, exceptional, and they were the best in their own way, for sure. One of the coaches that there are many coaches that I've been able to work with that were wonderful. One of them I had a chance to coach with in Olympic development, which is kind of a junior Olympic type of scenario out in the Midwest when I lived in Illinois. His name is Ian Barker. Ian Barker is now he's a director of coaching of United Soccer Coaches. It's the largest coaching organization in the world, I believe, for soccer. And he was tremendous. He and I went on a couple of tours to Europe and South America with top teams, youth teams, and one of our funnest moments was when we beat Manchester United's U17 team. That was fun. We enjoyed that. Probably the top coach I coached against, Caleb Porter. Caleb Porter is the current coach for Columbus Crew in the MLS. In his college coaching career, he used to coach at a school called University of Akron, and that's when I was at Northern Illinois University. And when I think back about how he coached, I think at the time he was ahead of his time. When I see what he's done now, he's has had a tremendous pro career, and it's been kind of fun to watch him.
Perfect. Listen, Steve, a really, really good conversation with loads of really interesting bits, which I'm sure everyone will find useful. Really appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast, and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.